The thing about first contact protocols is that they're designed by committees who've never actually met aliens. 27 pages of guidelines on proper greetings, gift exchange etiquette, and cultural sensitivity, all written by beings who considered a heated faculty meeting the height of interspecies tension. The architects of these protocols certainly never anticipated that the entire framework could collapse, because someone forgot to mention that hitting children might be considered poor form. Commander Vex Thule of the Nexari Sovereignty examined the human delegation with the sort of professional disdain typically reserved for inferior technology. The diplomatic reception aboard his flagship, the Sovereign's Patience, proceeded exactly as his briefings had predicted. Awkward pleasantries, primitive refreshments, and the usual parade of soft-bodied mammals trying to impress their betters. Your vessel's construction techniques are adequate, Vexthul informed Captain Morrison of the human colony ship New Harmony. The commander's chitinous exterior gleamed under the chamber's amber lighting, his four arms gesturing with practiced authority. Though I confess surprise at your navigational capabilities. Our scouts estimated another century before your species achieved interstellar travel. Captain Morrison smiled with the sort of patience that comes from dealing with customs officials across 3-star systems. We're full of surprises, Commander. Perhaps you'd like to meet some of our civilian specialists? Dr. Vasquez here leads our xenobiology research. Dr. Elena Vasquez stepped forward, extending her hand in the quaint human gesture of greeting. She was unremarkable by most standards. Medium height, graying hair pulled back efficiently, the kind of person who blended into crowds and remembered everything. Commander Vexthul, your species' respiratory adaptations are fascinating. I'd love to discuss your homeworld's atmospheric composition sometime. Vexthul examined the offered hand with the enthusiasm of someone identifying a particularly uninteresting specimen. Perhaps. Though I suspect your understanding of atmospheric sciences is limited. Probably, Elena agreed cheerfully. We're still learning. Over 97% of viewers here are watching without subscribing. Don't be one of them. Hit that subscribe button right now and join the journey. Every click helps us grow stronger, and you'll never miss the next epic story. The reception continued with the mechanical precision of diplomatic theater. Nexari officers mingled with human civilians, exchanging stilted pleasantries and carefully avoiding topics that might cause offense. The humans had prepared traditional foods, a selection of fruits, breads, and beverages that their xenobiology team deemed safe for Nexari consumption. The Nexari, in turn, had provided what their cultural attaché described as ceremonial nourishment crystals, which tasted like sucking on flavored minerals. Elena's 8-year-old daughter Maya darted between the adults with the fearless curiosity that made children simultaneously wonderful and terrifying. She'd already peppered 3 different Nexari officers with questions about their extra arms, their home planet, and whether they had pets. Most had answered with the sort of bemused tolerance adults reserved for persistent small creatures. Maya approached the refreshment table, where Vexthul stood discussing trade possibilities with 2 human engineers. She reached for one of the crystal chalices filled with the human's offering of fruit juice, standing on her tiptoes to grasp the ornate vessel. "Careful, sweetheart," Elena called from across the room, where she was explaining human reproductive cycles to a bewildered Nexari biologist. Maya nodded seriously, lifting the chalice with both hands. The engineering discussion had grown animated, with gestures and technical terminology flying between species. Vexthul stepped backward to emphasize a point about cargo capacity, just as Maya turned from the table. The collision was inevitable. Maya stumbled, the chalice tilted, and a stream of purple fruit juice cascaded down the front of Vexthul's ceremonial robes, an intricate garment of silver threading that probably cost more than most humans earned in a year. The room didn't exactly fall silent. Conversations continued, but with that particular quality of forced normalcy that occurs when everyone pretends not to notice an awkward situation developing. Maya looked up at the towering alien commander, her eyes wide with the universal expression of a child who knows she's just made a terrible mistake. "I'm sorry. I'm really, really sorry." Vexthul stared down at the spreading stain across his ceremonial attire. His compound eyes shifted between the damage and the small human responsible. "Clumsy," he said quietly. "Undisciplined." "It was an accident," Maya said, tears beginning to form. "I didn't mean to." The slap came without warning. Vexthul's primary right hand struck the child across her face, with enough force to send her stumbling backward. Not enough to cause serious injury. The commander was too professional for that, but sufficient to establish dominance and deliver correction. Maya hit the deck hard, one hand pressed to her reddening cheek, too shocked to cry. The engineering discussion stopped. Actually, most conversations in the immediate area stopped, creating an expanding bubble of silence that spread outward through the reception hall. Humans and Nexari alike turned to stare at the scene, a decorated military commander standing over a fallen human child. "There," Vexthul announced with satisfaction. "Proper correction for improper behavior. Your offspring will remember to exercise greater care in future." Captain Morrison took a half step forward, his diplomatic training warring with more primitive instincts. "Commander, among humans we don't—" "Your parenting methods are clearly inadequate," Vexthul interrupted. "Children require immediate consequence for destructive actions. This is elementary psychology." Elena had gone very still across the room. The Nexari biologist she'd been speaking with continued explaining something about spawning pools, apparently unaware that his audience was no longer listening. Elena's eyes were fixed on her daughter, who was now sitting on the deck, small hand still pressed to her face, looking around with the bewildered expression of someone trying to understand what had just happened. "Dr. Vasquez?" the biologist prompted. "You mentioned wanting to compare respiratory systems?" Elena blinked once, slowly, then turned to face the alien scientist. Her voice remained perfectly level, professionally interested. "Of course. Forgive me, I was just observing the cultural exchange." She walked across the room with measured steps, helping Maya to her feet and examining the red mark on her daughter's cheek with clinical detachment. Maya pressed against her mother's side, seeking comfort and reassurance. "Are you all right, sweetheart?" Elena asked quietly. Maya nodded, though fresh tears had started flowing. Elena stood, one hand resting protectively on her daughter's shoulder, and looked directly at Commander Vexthul. The alien commander was already turning back to his interrupted conversation, clearly considering the matter resolved. "Commander," Elena called out. Vexthul paused, rotating to face her with the expression of someone being interrupted by a subordinate. "I wonder if I might request a private word with you." "At your convenience, of course." Several nearby humans exchanged glances. Captain Morrison opened his mouth to say something, then apparently thought better of it. "I fail to see what requires discussion," Vexthul replied. "The matter has been appropriately addressed." Elena's smile was perfectly pleasant, the sort of expression that belonged in academic conferences and polite disagreements over research methodology. "Oh, I'm sure it has. I simply hoped to share some information about human child development. Professional curiosity, you understand. Perhaps in your quarters, where we won't bore others with technical details." "Mommy," Maya whispered. "Why don't you go find Captain Morrison, sweetheart? I think he has some interesting star charts to show you." Maya hesitated, clearly reluctant to leave her mother's side. "Go ahead," Elena encouraged gently. "I'll be along shortly." The child reluctantly allowed Captain Morrison to guide her toward a group of human crew members, who immediately surrounded her with the protective instincts of a pack recognizing threatened young. Vexthul observed this behavior with the detached interest of a xenologist studying primitive social structures. Your species' emotional responses are excessive. The correction was minimal and appropriate. Absolutely, Elena agreed. I'm simply curious about the philosophical framework behind Nixari disciplinary methods. Academic interest, nothing more. The commander's compound eyes studied her for several seconds. Very well. A brief educational discussion may prove illuminating for your species. Elena nodded to Captain Morrison, who had been watching the exchange with growing concern. I'll rejoin the reception shortly, Captain. As they walked toward the corridor leading to the ship's officer quarters, other humans began quietly moving toward the exits. Not hurriedly. Nothing that could be interpreted as rude or aggressive. Just the sort of natural drift that occurs when a party reaches its natural conclusion. Elena followed Commander Vexthul down the pristine corridors of the Sovereign's patience, her expression remaining pleasantly curious, professionally engaged. She was already calculating atmospheric volume, air recycling rates, and the probable distribution patterns of the ship's life support systems. After all, she'd always believed in the importance of thorough research. Vexthul's quarters reflected the aesthetic sensibilities of a species that had conquered 14 star systems through superior firepower and organizational efficiency. Everything gleamed with the cold perfection of military precision. Angular furniture that prioritized function over comfort, displays showing fleet positions and tactical data, and walls decorated with commendations that translated roughly to excellence in subjugation and outstanding achievement in cultural correction. Elena settled into the offered chair, which had clearly been designed for a species with a different skeletal structure. She appeared genuinely fascinated by the geometric patterns etched into the metal walls. Remarkable craftsmanship, she observed. Do these symbols represent military achievements? Historical victories, Vexthul confirmed, activating a beverage dispenser that produced something resembling liquid mercury. Each denotes a successful integration of primitive civilizations into our sovereignty. 17 campaigns across 3 decades. Integration, Elena repeated thoughtfully. Such an interesting euphemism. You must have encountered diverse parenting philosophies during these integrations. The commander's mandibles clicked in what passed for amusement among his kind. Diverse, yes. Effective, no. Most species coddle their offspring until they become liabilities. The Nixari method produces superior results through consistent application of immediate consequences. Elena leaned forward slightly, her tone carrying the enthusiasm of someone discovering a fascinating research opportunity. How immediate are we talking? In human developmental psychology, timing plays a crucial role in behavioral modification. Instantaneous correction prevents repetition of undesirable behavior, Vexthul explained, settling into his command chair with practiced authority. Your child demonstrated carelessness and damaged ceremonial property. I administered appropriate consequence, simple cause and effect. But here's where it becomes interesting, Elena replied, pulling out a small recording device. Do you mind if I document this? For research purposes, of course. What you've described isn't actually cause and effect from a human neurological standpoint. Vexthul gestured dismissively with his secondary arms. Human neurology is primitive. Your emotional responses interfere with logical decision-making. Primitive, perhaps, but remarkably sophisticated in its own way. Elena activated the recording device. When a human parent witnesses their child being harmed, several fascinating things happen simultaneously. The amygdala floods the system with adrenaline and cortisol, while the hypothalamus triggers what we call the protective rage response. Emotional instability, Vexthul diagnosed. This supports my assessment of human inferiority. Elena nodded enthusiastically. It does seem illogical, doesn't it? But here's the remarkable part. Those same neurochemical changes that appear to be emotional instability actually enhance cognitive function in specific areas. Pattern recognition increases by roughly 40%. Problem-solving capabilities shift toward what we term creative destruction. The commander's compound eyes focused more intently on his guest. Something in her tone had shifted, though her demeanor remained academically cheerful. The truly fascinating aspect, Elena continued, is how human protective instincts bypass normal social constraints. You see, under ordinary circumstances, I would never consider harming a diplomat. The political implications alone would be catastrophic. But when my daughter was struck, she paused, as if searching for the right scientific terminology. Well, let's just say the risk assessment matrix becomes remarkably flexible. Vexthul straightened in his chair. Are you threatening me, human? Threatening? Oh, heavens no. Elena laughed, a sound completely devoid of humor. I'm educating you. For instance, did you know that human mothers have historically demonstrated a willingness to engage targets that outweigh them by factors of 10 to 1? Bears, large predatory cats, armed military personnel, size differential becomes irrelevant when offspring are endangered. Your species' emotional responses are well documented. They make you predictably irrational. Predictably creative, Elena corrected. You see, Commander, your assessment contains a fundamental error. You've classified the incident with Maya as resolved through superior force application. But from a human biological standpoint, you've just initiated a threat-response cascade that won't terminate until the threat is neutralized. The alien commander's posture shifted subtly. You're suggesting retaliation? I'm explaining biology. Elena consulted her recording device as if checking technical specifications. The fascinating thing about human threat assessment is its adaptability. Since direct physical confrontation would be inadvisable, you're larger, stronger, and aboard your own vessel, human neurology automatically begins exploring alternative approaches. Such as Elena's expression brightened with the enthusiasm of someone sharing a particularly clever discovery. Well, I couldn't help but notice your atmospheric recycling systems during our tour earlier. Quite sophisticated. Your engineering staff was very helpful in explaining the interconnected life support networks between ships in your fleet. Vexthul's primary hands moved toward his communication console. Oh, please don't feel obligated to contact security, Elena said mildly. This is purely theoretical discussion. Besides, I suspect your medical bay contains some interesting research opportunities. Would it be possible to examine some tissue samples for comparative xenobiology purposes? What tissue samples? Well, your diplomatic staff was quite generous with biological data during our cultural exchange. Shed skin cells, respiratory secretions, metabolic byproducts. Humans are excellent at collecting samples without anyone noticing. Elena's smile remained perfectly professional. It's remarkable what one can accomplish with basic laboratory equipment and a thorough understanding of alien physiology. The commander's chitinous exterior had taken on a distinctly paler hue. You're describing biological warfare. I'm describing scientific methodology, Elena corrected gently, though I suppose the applications could be considered educational. The beautiful thing about tailored biological agents is their specificity. Properly designed, they affect only the intended target species while remaining completely harmless to others. Vexthul's four arms moved in precise coordination, activating security protocols and communication systems. This conversation is terminated. You will return to your vessel immediately. Elena made no move to leave her chair. I understand your concern, Commander, but consider this from a research perspective. Your species values efficiency and immediate consequence, correct? What could be more efficient than a response that targets only those who threaten human children? Security to my quarters, Vexthul spoke into his communicator. Escort the human delegate to the docking bay. Actually, before I go, Elena said, standing gracefully, I was wondering if I might visit your medical facility. Maya's cheek should probably be examined by qualified personnel, and I'd hate for any minor injuries to develop complications. The commander stared at her with the growing realization that he had fundamentally misunderstood something important about human behavioral patterns. Elena moved toward the door, pausing to examine one of the tactical displays. Your fleet coordination is impressive, by the way. All ships sharing atmospheric recycling and medical resources, very efficient for long-term operations. She turned back to face him one final time, her expression carrying the same pleasant academic interest she'd maintained throughout their conversation. Thank you for the educational opportunity, Commander. I think this discussion has been remarkably illuminating for both our species. The Nexari Medical Bay hummed with the sort of sterile efficiency that made hospitals across the galaxy indistinguishable from one another. Elena moved between the diagnostic stations with the casual confidence of someone who belonged there, examining alien medical equipment with the focused attention of a professional peer review. Fascinating design philosophy, she murmured to Medical Officer Trendar, who had been assigned to examine Maya's injury. Your cellular regeneration chambers operate on completely different principles than human healing technology. Trendar's secondary arms manipulated scanning instruments, while his primaries held Maya steady for examination. The child sat quietly on the diagnostic table, still subdued from her encounter with Commander Vexthul. The bruising is superficial, Trendar pronounced with clinical detachment. No structural damage to facial bones or soft tissue. Complete healing anticipated within 4 of your solar rotations. Excellent prognosis, Elena agreed, simultaneously recording notes and studying the atmospheric intake vents positioned near the ceiling. Your diagnostic capabilities are remarkably advanced. This equipment must be integrated with the ship's central systems. All medical facilities connect to primary environmental controls, Trendar confirmed, apparently pleased by Elena's professional interest. Atmospheric purity, temperature regulation, pathogen screening, standard integration protocols. Maya shifted uncomfortably on the examination table. Mommy, can we go home now? Almost finished, sweetheart. Elena's attention had shifted to the molecular synthesizer responsible for creating medication compounds. Officer Trendar, would it be possible to observe your pharmaceutical fabrication process? We're always interested in advancing human medical capabilities. The Nexari medic gestured toward the device with obvious pride. Our synthesis technology produces compounds with 97.4% molecular accuracy, far superior to primitive chemical mixing methods. Elena moved closer to examine the synthesizer's input chamber, noting the direct connection to the ship's atmospheric processing system. Standard safety protocol: any airborne pharmaceutical could be distributed through life support networks in case of medical emergencies. Remarkable integration, she observed, placing her sample collection kit on a nearby workstation. Your engineers have created a truly comprehensive biological support network. While Trendar explained the technical specifications with characteristic Nexari superiority, Elena methodically prepared her materials. The tissue samples collected during the diplomatic reception had provided excellent baseline data on Nexari physiology. The atmospheric analysis from her tour revealed standard oxygen-nitrogen mixtures with trace elements specific to their species' homeworld requirements. Creating the pathogen had required careful consideration of several variables. Lethality was counterproductive. Dead diplomats created wars, while sick diplomats created conversations. The compound needed to be species-specific, targeting only Nexari biological systems, while leaving human physiology completely unaffected. Most importantly, it needed to teach a lesson that would be remembered. Elena's modified organism was elegantly simple: a respiratory virus that hijacked Nexari neural pathways, triggering controlled inflammation in brain tissue responsible for pain processing and emotional regulation. The result would be intense physical discomfort combined with heightened emotional sensitivity, essentially forcing aggressive, hierarchical beings to experience vulnerability and empathy in concentrated doses. The synthesis chamber requires atmospheric samples for calibration, Trendar explained, opening the input valve. Standard quality control measures. Of course, Elena agreed, introducing her prepared sample into the system. Quality control is essential for medical applications. The pathogen integrated seamlessly with the ship's environmental systems, designed to replicate and distribute through standard air recycling processes. Within hours, every being aboard the Sovereign's patients would be breathing Elena's educational curriculum. "Mommy, I want to go home," Maya repeated more insistently. "We're leaving now, sweetheart." Elena gathered her equipment with practiced efficiency. "Thank you for your assistance, Medical Officer Trendar. This has been tremendously educational." Back aboard the human colony ship, Elena watched the Nexari fleet through the observation deck's viewports. 4 warships maintaining standard formation, their running lights creating geometric patterns against the stellar background. Captain Morrison joined her at the viewport, Maya sleeping peacefully in the cabin below. "Dr. Vasquez, I need to ask what happened during your conversation with their commander." "We discussed differences in child-rearing philosophy," Elena replied, checking her chronometer. "The commander was very informative about Nexari disciplinary methods." "And?" "I shared some insights about human protective instincts." Morrison studied her profile, noting the clinical detachment that seemed oddly inappropriate for a mother whose child had been assaulted hours earlier. "Elena, what did you do?" Before she could respond, the communication system activated with incoming transmission from the Sovereign's patients. Commander Vexthul's image appeared on the main display, though something seemed different about his usual commanding presence. "Captain Morrison," Vexthul began, his voice carrying an unusual tremor, "we are experiencing technical difficulties with our environmental systems." "What kind of difficulties, Commander?" "Medical issues among crew members. Fever, disorientation, heightened emotional responses." Vexthul paused, one hand pressed against his chitinous temple. "Our medical staff requests consultation with your xenobiology specialists." Elena stepped forward, her expression professionally concerned. "Commander, how interesting. What sort of emotional responses?" Vexthul's compound eyes focused on her with obvious difficulty. "Excessive empathy, uncontrollable concern for subordinates' welfare. Several officers have been crying." He spoke the last word as if it described a previously unknown biological function. "Crying," Elena repeated thoughtfully. "How unprecedented for your species. Are these symptoms spreading?" "Throughout the ship, and our sister vessels are reporting similar." Vexthul swayed slightly, gripping his command chair for stability. "Similar manifestations." Captain Morrison looked between Elena and the viewscreen with growing comprehension. "Dr. Vasquez, please tell me you didn't—" "The truly fascinating aspect of this situation," Elena interrupted, addressing Vexthul directly, "is how the symptoms you're describing closely parallel human neurochemical responses to witnessing harm inflicted on children." Vexthul's image flickered as he struggled to maintain focus. You did something to us," I educated you, Elena corrected gently. Your species values immediate consequences for improper behavior, correct? Consider this a practical demonstration of human protective instincts in action. You've poisoned my entire fleet. Elena's expression remained clinically detached. Poisoned is such an inflammatory term. I prefer enhanced your capacity for empathetic response. The compound I introduced is specifically designed to be non-lethal, while providing intensive education about emotional vulnerability. Other Nexari officers appeared on the transmission, several visibly distressed, others supporting colleagues who seemed overwhelmed by previously unknown sensations. The beautiful thing about tailored biological agents, Elena continued, is their teaching potential. For the next several days, every member of your fleet will experience heightened emotional sensitivity, enhanced empathy, and acute awareness of others' pain. Essentially, you'll understand exactly what my 8-year-old daughter felt when you struck her. Vexthul attempted to stand, then thought better of it. This is biological warfare, an act of aggression against diplomatic personnel. This is scientific methodology applied to cross-cultural education, Elena replied, though I suppose the distinction might seem academic from your current perspective. Captain Morrison stepped forward, clearly struggling with the implications. Elena, the diplomatic ramifications are fascinating to contemplate, Elena agreed. Commander Vexthul, I'm prepared to provide complete treatment protocols for your condition. The antidote is quite effective, and I've documented the entire synthesis process for your medical teams. Give us the cure, Vexthul demanded, though his usual authority had been replaced by something resembling pleading. Elena smiled with the same pleasant academic interest she'd maintained throughout their acquaintance. Of course, Commander. Right after we discuss some revisions to your species' first contact protocols regarding human children. 3 weeks later, the Nexari fleet remained anchored in human space, like guests who'd overstayed their welcome, but were too embarrassed to leave. Their ships hung motionless against the void, running lights dimmed to conserve power, while their crews recovered from what official reports would eventually classify as an unprecedented educational experience. Admiral Kefsol of the Nexari High Command materialized via quantum transmission in the conference room aboard the New Harmony, her holographic presence radiating the sort of barely contained fury that came from having to clean up someone else's diplomatic catastrophe. Dr. Vasquez, the Admiral began without preamble, you have created a situation of considerable complexity. Elena sat across from the projection, flanked by Captain Morrison and 2 human diplomatic attachés who looked like they'd aged several years in the past month. Maya played quietly in the corner with a collection of alien artifacts that various Nexari officers had sent as apology gifts. Apparently, enforced empathy made them remarkably generous. Admiral Kefsol, Elena replied with professional courtesy. I trust your officers have found the recovery process informative. Informative. The Admiral's mandibles clicked in what definitely wasn't amusement. Commander Vexthul spent 6 days weeping uncontrollably every time he encountered junior personnel. My tactical officer adopted 3 orphaned maintenance drones. Half my fleet is now participating in what you humans call group therapy sessions. Captain Morrison cleared his throat diplomatically. Admiral, we appreciate the challenges this situation has created. Challenges, Admiral Kefsol repeated. Captain Morrison, do you comprehend what Dr. Vasquez has accomplished? She has effectively weaponized emotional development. My crews are now requesting shore leave to process their feelings and explore healthier communication strategies. Elena consulted her tablet, scrolling through data with the casual interest of someone reviewing grocery lists. The neurochemical adjustments should stabilize within another week, though I suspect the psychological insights will prove more durable. That, Admiral Kefsol said grimly, is precisely the problem. The holographic projection flickered as the Admiral accessed files from her command console. Command has reviewed Commander Vexthul's incident reports, medical analyses, and psychological evaluations. Your biological agent has been classified as the most sophisticated, non-lethal weapon our science division has ever encountered. Weapon seems harsh, Elena observed. I prefer empathy, enhancement therapy. You neutralized an entire battle group using nothing more than atmospheric samples and basic laboratory equipment, Admiral Kefsal continued. Our strategic analysts are having nervous breakdowns trying to calculate defensive measures against future therapy sessions. Maya looked up from her play area. Mommy, why does the tall alien lady sound scared? She's not scared, sweetheart, Elena replied gently. She's experiencing professional anxiety about revised threat assessment protocols. Admiral Kefsal's image turned toward the child with the sort of careful attention usually reserved for unexploded ordnance. Young human, are you, well, following the incident with Commander Vexthal? Maya shrugged with 8-year-old resilience. My face stopped hurting, and everyone's been really nice since then. The commander sent me candy crystals and said he was sorry for being mean. Candy crystals, Admiral Kefsal repeated faintly. He drew me a picture too, Maya added helpfully. It's not very good, but Mommy says artistic skill improves with emotional growth. Elena turned back to the Admiral with renewed attention. Which brings us to the matter of ongoing diplomatic relations. I assume Command has developed new protocols for human interaction? The Admiral's expression suggested she'd rather be discussing any other topic in the known universe. Nexari crews have been issued comprehensive guidelines regarding human offspring. Physical contact is now strictly prohibited unless specifically requested by human parents. Educational correction is to be administered exclusively by human authority figures. All diplomatic personnel must complete cultural sensitivity training focusing on mammalian protective instincts. Excellent adaptations, Elena approved. Though I suspect the most significant changes are less formal in nature. Meaning? Elena gestured toward her tablet, which displayed communication logs from the Nexari fleet. Your crews have been sending apology gifts to Maya for 3 weeks, not because Command ordered them to, but because they genuinely feel remorse for her distress. That level of cross-species emotional connection was previously considered impossible by your xenopsychologists. Admiral Kefsal stared at the data with the expression of someone discovering that gravity had suddenly begun flowing upward. Our behavioral specialists are calling it acquired interspecies empathy syndrome. Catchy terminology, Elena said, though I prefer to think of it as expanded emotional intelligence. Dr. Vasquez, the Admiral said carefully, Command requires assurance that no similar incidents will occur during future human contact. Your species' capacity for creative retaliation has necessitated significant revision of our expansion protocols. Elena leaned back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. Admiral, let me ask you something. Before this incident, how did Nexari forces typically respond to resistance from species you were integrating? Superior firepower and strategic intimidation. And how effective was that approach? Admiral Kefsal's mandibles clicked with reluctant acknowledgement. Generally definitive. Most species submitted rather than face complete military defeat. Now imagine, Elena continued, what happens when you encounter a species that doesn't respond predictably to conventional intimidation? A species that values individual members, especially children, more than collective survival. A species that solves problems through lateral thinking rather than hierarchical force application. The Admiral's holographic form seemed to diminish slightly. Your point is noted. The fascinating thing about humans, Elena said, is that we don't typically seek conflict. But when our families are threatened, we become remarkably innovative about neutralizing threats. And our definition of family tends to expand over time. Maya wandered over to her mother's chair, holding up a small crystal sculpture that one of the Nexari engineers had fashioned. "Mommy, Officer Kelwin wants to know if we'd like to visit their homeworld sometime. He says they have really pretty gardens." Elena smiled, ruffling her daughter's hair with genuine affection. "That sounds lovely, sweetheart. Maybe when Admiral Kefsol's crews finish their emotional development coursework." Admiral Kefsol observed this interaction with the fascination of someone witnessing an entirely new form of physics. "Dr. Vasquez, Command has authorized me to extend formal recognition of your educational methodology. The Nexari sovereignty acknowledges that human protective instincts represent a significant factor in interspecies relations." "How diplomatic of you, Admiral." "We also," the Admiral continued with obvious reluctance, "request access to your research data on biological empathy enhancement. For defensive purposes, you understand." Elena's smile carried just enough academic smugness to be thoroughly irritating. "I'd be delighted to share my findings, Admiral, though I should mention that the techniques require considerable understanding of human emotional neurology. Your scientists might find the learning curve challenging." The transmission flickered as Admiral Kefsol prepared to disconnect. "Dr. Vasquez, one final question. How many other human parents possess your particular combination of scientific expertise and protective instincts?" Elena glanced around the conference room, noting the various human personnel who'd been listening to the conversation, with expressions ranging from pride to mild terror. "Admiral," she said pleasantly, "that's rather like asking how many stars are in the galaxy. The exact number is less important than understanding that they're everywhere, and each one is capable of producing quite spectacular results under the right circumstances." The holographic projection vanished, leaving the conference room in a sudden silence. Captain Morrison stared at Elena with the expression of someone who'd just realized he'd been sharing coffee with a dormant volcano. "Elena, do you comprehend what you've just accomplished?" "I protected my daughter," Elena replied simply. "Everything else was just applied xenobiology." Maya looked up from her crystal sculpture, beaming with the uncomplicated happiness of childhood. "Mommy, does this mean the Nexari won't hit any more kids?" Elena gathered her daughter into a gentle hug, her voice carrying the quiet satisfaction of someone who'd solved a particularly complex equation. "I think it's safe to say, sweetheart, that they've learned their lesson." Outside the viewports, the Nexari fleet began powering up their engines for departure, their crews undoubtedly eager to return home with new protocols, enhanced emotional intelligence, and a profound respect for the creative problem-solving capabilities of human mothers. The universe, it seemed, had become a considerably more empathetic place.